you're going to be working with a lot of brown. Brown, 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 they're brown. Gray, brown, brown, brown. Do crevices, freedom of nooks and crannies, brown, 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 bronze, brown, are shades of brown. These bricks are brown. The big door 6 is brown. This texture is called brown, 144. Does it sound like the same clip of brown being edited into it? Because it should. Okay, but seriously, that was a lot of fun to make. It is true, a lot of the textures in Doom are brown, and this makes it a decent amount easier to work with said textures, but it's not foolproof. It can be difficult, but one of the major things about texturing that's strange is that it's very subjective, and it depends from person to person and level to level on how those textures actually work. And I think more important than the textures you use is how you fit them in, honestly, which again falls down to having very meticulous and minor detail throughout the level. So I've gone ahead and made this little test map to kind of show you guys some of those techniques for texturing. Now, when it comes to computers, there are a plethora of different types of computers, screens, and textures that you can use in order to make the room look better, as I've described before. So all of those different textures are very nice, and you want to ensure that these textures are aligned properly, otherwise they do lose their sheen. This one kind of gets away with it almost because it's so cluttered, but most of them don't, unless you're really, really creative. So you can work with a lot of these textures in a way that makes it look a lot nicer in a room, and it helps break up the flatness of a wall. But you can't have computers everywhere. So in these cases, you will find great use out of textures that are similar. In order to show this, I've segregated these walls into 64-bit pieces, or 64 map pixel pieces. And you can see that I can change this texture here to something similar to the texture used. It doesn't feel out of place, and it actually does add a great deal of detail to what's going on. And you can use this with all of the different kinds that they provide you with. It always just fits in. So using textures such as those is a great deal helpful. Another one, for an example, would even be the cement textures. As hard as they are to honestly use, the fact that they give you so many of them is what makes it a lot nicer. So I can take the wall here and turn it into that wall, and take this piece here and turn it into this wall, and it all makes it flow better together, and it adds the detail that I was telling you about, even though now we're dealing with flat walls. Another way to deal with breaking up flat walls that isn't texture tricks would be depth, crevices, and things that add more dimension to a room. Even something as simple as adding light fixtures into tiny rooms on the side of the map space. Now typically you don't want to use the single texture all the way through into it, otherwise it looks strange, which is why you would take textures like this and put it on the insides of these. To make it even a little bit better, you might consider using something such as a door stop on the outside of the corners, or even a door track, in order to kind of separate the element from the rest of the room and give it a bit more detail. If you ever want to change floor textures, you don't want to do it abruptly like this all the time. It does work with doors a bit easier, but one of the major things you could do is change the floor height. This is a great way to show that what you're going on to is in fact something different from what you're a part of at the moment, and thus the change in floor texture isn't as harsh to the player. It also matters that you put a step of some kind or the texture underlying it. Of course, you want it to be pegged correctly to match. Changing wall textures, such as from this to this, you typically want to use either doors or entirely different rooms separate from the room you're changing from. Another technique you could use is also the door stops or door tracks on the edges of the wall. It works best with textures that aren't too terribly wildly different, such as transitioning from this to cement. It's going to take a bit more of a separation for that to kind of mesh well throughout the level. There are also a variety of techniques that you can use for doors. When you have a room that is significantly tall, a texture and room creation could be making little overhangs for the doors so that they don't pillar upwards, such as this. And there are two ways you can texture it to look good, either a metal or use the room itself and just have it pegged correctly to match. This works on all sizes of doors as well. Another possibility is just simply putting things on the sides of the doors, such as door stops, door tracks, or even light fixtures, as a way to break up the fact that there is in fact a door there. Another possible way, and this requires a lot of forward thinking to do and so isn't as usable, is to actually make it so that the doors themselves are inside of a wall, such as this, and this can use the same technique of using door stops or lights on the inside. That way we'll still provide your door, but now you've got it actually inset to the walls and makes it feel a lot nicer of a transition. This will also help you if you choose to change to something of a different texture between rooms. Having the extra distance going between one side of the door to the other helps in pushing the fact that the room is indeed different from the one that the player was in. When it comes to roof texturing, that's a bit easier to get away with being bland. Some techniques that you can use to fix this, however, would be simply putting lights. So I'm going to go ahead and go into wireframe so I can see where my blue squares here are, and go ahead and trace around one, and then go right around the outside of it as well. And we'll find that one. Should be here, yes. And we can go ahead and just put a light texture onto it, and then texture the outside of this piece as well to separate it more from the roof, which gives it not only a bit of depth, but provides a scenario where you understand where the lighting of something might be coming from, rather than a room just being ominously lit, such as this one. And it also breaks up the texture of the roof, providing you with something else to look at. And when I say something else to look at, most people don't look at the light, but there is a lot of background processing that the human brain does when you look at any scenery, whether it be on a computer screen or in real life. You don't see everything perfectly, because the brain makes a lot of predictions, such as the fact that you're always looking at your nose and glasses frames if you have them, but since that stimuli never changes or moves, it filters those out. That little fact alone can show you guys how much background processing really goes into what you call perception and sight when it comes to visibility of the things around you, which is pretty important that we understand. So even though you don't directly look at the light, the brain does notice it, and it does help it give an idea of what the depth of the scene actually is based on, say, how far away you are and how quickly the dimensions and perspective of said light changes while you're walking around. This helps give you, or the player, a better idea of the 3D space that they're in, and can thus improve the feel of a map quite significantly. That is why I stress so much about depth. When your brain can actually see things that have perspective other than the main perspective of, say, the walls, it provides that depth that helps the brain amalgamate just where in the 3D position the player really is. And it can make it that much more immersive and that much more compelling to be in said room, and makes it quite important. Hopefully I have gone through quite a great deal of information that could be helpful. This one is a difficult one to put out because, as I've said before, texturing is highly subjective. It really depends on what the player and what the creator thinks looks good. Some people may not like the choice of roof that I have chosen for this room here, and those people are not wrong. Even though I think it doesn't look bad, I don't think it looks amazing, but I don't think it looks bad in any way, there are people out there that would absolutely hate that I've used that roof texture, just as much as even the walls. Such a very generic and popularly seen wall in Doom games, some people just might not like this wall. And for that little fact, anyone that plays a level that has this texture is going to significantly more see the negativity of the map and have a generally worse perception of what the map's design overall really was, even if it was a truly amazing masterpiece of balanced gameplay and puzzle-solving maze design. So texturing is fairly important, but at the same time it's something that you can't necessarily just go out and tell people how to do. It is going to vary. I hope that this has been most helpful to everybody. I do think I've covered quite a good few topics. If I haven't said anything that you really wanted to hear, or if you want me to explain more on something, please leave a comment in the section below, and I'll try my best to get back to you. I don't ever rush these videos out. I do take some time to mess around with the editor and consider at the heart really what the question or suggestion is before I make the videos. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.